Hey everybody, Bernie Gallerani here, bringing you another episode of Success is Not Convenient. Thank you everybody for participating and listening, and hopefully we'll be able to create some value for you today in this conversation. I have with me Nikki on our team. So Nikki, thank you for joining us, and we are going to be chatting today about, we could use a couple words. I'll use the first word is complacency. It's kind of a dirty word that some people don't like to hear. I personally don't mind hearing it. I don't like the word. I don't like that if I feel like I'm in complacency. But in the reality, I think almost everybody is in there throughout the weeks, months, and or years. And so I think it's something that we might all be able to relate to, Nikki. So we're going to call this podcast, we're going to label it as adjusting your thermostat. And it means adjusting your financial thermostat. And that is, what does that really mean, adjusting the financial thermostat? Well, what we're going to talk about here over the next 45 or so minutes is we're going to talk about why people and realtors in general choose to make as much as they've made before when they're independent contractors. Let me explain to you what this means. When you're an independent contractor, you either come into a business or had an income previously, and let's just call that income $75,000. And they then start a business, and once they reach that threshold of what their pain point is, which is paying their bills and doing those kinds of things, that income typically doesn't exceed past that. And so we're going to talk a lot about that today and hopefully try to unpack some things, Nikki. So thank you for joining us. And I know that you get a chance to work with the agents on our team and kind of go through their business planning and their financial picture, their goal setting. So let's talk a little bit about that. So we'll sit down and we'll goal set, right? So an agent does that process, and then they talk about the money that they want to earn. When they write that amount of money that they want to earn, what do you think at that moment when they write that down and that number supersedes what they typically do?
They don't believe it. They don't believe that they actually are capable of making that money because they're used to a level of what they've made before in the past. And so learning how to increase their financial thermostat to reach that goal takes a different mindset.
So why don't they believe it though? I mean, if they said it and they can see that other people are doing it, they just don't believe that's possible for them.
They have to believe within themselves first in what they do on a daily basis, and they haven't done the work yet. So when you sit down, say we take a brand new agent, and they think they can make this, but then they have to also realize what it's going to take in order to achieve it. And so in that work, they start to not believe within themselves, hey, I can actually achieve this. It is the story that they tell themselves based off past environments that they've been in a lot of times can always be a cause of it as well.
Well, that's fair. But the thing is, though, if they don't believe it and they then are around it, and then they know it's possible, but yet they still don't do it. Why is that? Why, like from my experience, part of believing it's possible is being around the people that are achieving it and watching them create steps towards achieving those financial goals. So if you're around it and you see it, and then you get to a certain point where you exceed your minimum standard, then why shouldn't you start believing that you can exceed your financial picture? But yet they kind of stop working once they almost self-sabotage themselves. Why is that?
Well, then take the foot off the gas, right? You opened it up very easily of complacency. Complacency is a disease, right? So I've reached where I wanted to go, and now my foot's off the gas, I can kind of coast. And we get complacent of where we are in life. I mean, partly because they don't dream bigger.
Well, that's a fair statement. I think we live in this I'll use box or this environment. Maybe an environment's a better word. We live in this environment where we have the home we have, we have the car we have. Making money, and for a lot of people, belongs to other people. Meaning, I have this nice little house and I have this perfectly good, reliable car. Nobody I really know or hang out with has any significant amount of money in the bank. And if they do have money in the bank, they got lucky. They're smarter than me. They're this and whatever. So it's the continual conversation that goes on in their head that creates the nice little house they live in and the reliable car. The discomfort of believing that you can own something beyond your current environment is a mental challenge for most people.
It is. Raising your financial thermostat is really a mind shift. right? You kind of hit on it. I have a nice car, a nice home. I'm safe. Because as humans, we just want safety and security.
Mm-hmm.
But when we want to push past that and the discomfort,
Mm-hmm.
what does that bring us? Fear.
Fear. Yeah. What?
Ugh.
Fear. I was like, fear is like
Yeah.
a thief of real joy. I don't know if I was talking with somebody. I think I was talking with somebody the other day. We were talking about fear stealing everything from you. What really it is nothing more than an emotion. It's not even a real thing. And so there might be people that would argue that, well, I mean, I get really fearful. You only get fearful of something you don't know. So if there's things that you have to venture into that you don't know, you're going to have some fear associated with that. I would guess when you were a very little child and you started to walk and you fell down, you probably had some fear, but your mom or your dad pushed you on to continue to keep taking steps. And yet today we get up and walk around and do our daily life and don't even think about what a challenge that was for us when we were 1 year old, let's just say, right? And so is it really that it's hard? I mean, or that it's not possible? Or is it that because we haven't done it yet, the challenge of doing something different creates this emotion that we call fear,
Mm-hmm.
right? I love that saying. It says false evidence appearing real,
Yep.
right? Like it actually is a real thing, and it's not even a real thing. And I'll tell you, I'll give you an example. So, has there been in your life something that you do regularly that to you comes second nature, that you don't have any fear in at all, but yet you challenge somebody with doing that same thing and they just shut down and say, "Oh, I won't be able to do that."
I can't do it. Yeah.
Yeah. So would you then agree that fear is false?
Yeah. It's the story you tell yourself
It's
because
just
you're
yeah.
not willing to push yourself to be uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Right. And like
Yeah.
you asking me to do this podcast, I looked at you like a deer in headlights.
Yeah.
I was fearful
Yeah.
because I didn't want to be uncomfortable.
Yeah.
But if I can push past my comfort, because it is a feeling and it's an emotion that we create ourselves and not allow it to control me, then I can actually grow.
Isn't that interesting? I love how you just said that. Like, it's a fear we create in ourselves. So we manufacture a debilitating stop in our life that says, I cannot move forward because I'm fearful. And yet the fear isn't real. It's created by you.
Mhm. Well, and this is why, a lot of agents do want to come be a part of this team because even though they may create their own fears, it's where the coaching and the accountability comes into place for us to help you walk through that because sometimes we can't do it ourselves, Bernie.
Yeah. Well, I think that I guess it would come down to really, if you look at the financial side of it, is even getting to where let's just use 75,000. I don't know where I just pulled that one out of the hat, but let's just use 75,000. So an agent comes to us,
Mm-hmm.
they had a previous job, they earned in the range of 50 to 75,000. However, they didn't earn 50 to 75,000 when they first got out of college or they first got out of high school. They didn't earn that kind of money out of the gate. Most people don't earn that kind of money out of the gate. Not that nobody here has, but most people don't. And so what happens is they built themselves up to whatever income level they decided to get to. Then they come into our world of real estate, and then we share with them, hey, by the way, we can show you how to make $200, $300, $400, $500,000 a year and even more. I guess for the most part, they get excited, right, about the idea of it.
It's the idea, the dream, until you actually have to put in the work.
You've worked with the company for how long?
Almost 4 years now.
4 years. So if you were to look at the work, and I'm going to use just the word work, okay, just whatever that means to somebody. What does that mean when you say they aren't willing to put? Because you've been around here for 4 years. Do any of these agents have to over exceed any normal job that anybody would have to regularly do if they weren't an independent contractor and they were an employee? Do any of them really super exceed any of those hours that somebody goes and earns $75,000 a year and they come to us and they work those similar hours as they would if they worked for somebody else and then exceed that 75,000 to say, let's say 200,000, but yet they can't even do that. So if you were to look at the industry in a whole, real estate industry in a whole, let's just talk about the behavior of a realtor. If you were to look at the industry as a whole, would you say that most meaning, okay, here's a better question. I'll ask it this way. What percentage of the time do you think out of all the agents, there's about 14 or 15,000 of them here in our great city of Nashville, out of all of that percentage or all those 14 or 15,000, What's the percentage of them that you say actually work full time?
Probably 10%, if that.
10%.
At best, Bernie.
Yeah, and I don't even know if I'd give it that high, but I would say 10% is a pretty pathetic number too.
Well, what is the first thing they say? Why do you get into real estate? What do they want?
Free time.
Free time, flexibility.
I want flexibility. I want to come and go as I want to come and go, and that's the reason why our industry is so poor. There was a great coach that shared something with another friend of mine who was a coaching client. It wasn't my coaching client, but it was a coaching client of the Mike Ferry organization, which I've been in for 21 years. And I love what the coach said. And he said, if I paid you a salary of $200,000 and I asked you to come in Monday through Friday from 8 o'clock in the morning to 5, and then I asked you to do these activities, prospect X amount of hours, make X amount of contacts, practice your scripts, practice your skills, go show properties, go list properties, whatever, and you had to do this Monday through Friday from 8 to 5, and then I asked you to work half of a day every other Saturday and then half a day every other Sunday, I would give you a $200,000 base salary, and every year after the first year, I'll raise your base salary $50,000 a year.
Sounds like a dream job.
Right? So in year 2, you're 250, in year 3, you're 300, in year 4, you're 350, year 5, you're 400, right? And so he asked this friend of mine, is that a job you're willing to accept?
Who doesn't turn that down?
And yet, this is actually the job that realtors have, but because they can't stay consistent in the work they do, they never reap the benefit of any financial level of success. And same thing applies to the topic we have today. And it's once they reach their minimum standard in income, let's just call it labeling it 75,000. We can label it anything. You can label it at 100,000 if you want, 200,000, whatever. But if you're saying 75,000, once they reach that threshold of what they're used to earning, they are independent contractors. So they can choose to come in and go or stay depending on how motivated they are to exceed the 75,000. And what we find, and that's the complacency side, and what we find is that most people don't have enough in them to exceed that to another level.
They don't. They don't have a big enough why and a big enough dream. Because if you have a strong why and you have bigger dreams for yourself, right? I hit this threshold. Well, you always tell us dream bigger, right? What's something you never thought you could do or have, and take the risk, because it is overcoming fear is about taking risk. Mm-hmm. And if you don't do that mindset and growth, you'll never push past that ceiling.
Yeah, this brings me back to an agent on our team. She started selling with us, and she's a superstar on our team, and so she makes a lot of money and does very, 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 very well financially. But I remember when she started, and she had this, I think it was a Camaro, and I'm not sure, but it was something like a Camaro, and she had this car payment, and it was whatever, a couple $100 a month, $230 a month or something like that. And she worked with me as an ISA, and she originally, and I didn't pay her a whole bunch of money. She worked kind of part-time, maybe 20 hours a week or something. And she drove this Camaro. Well, then she decided she wanted to become an agent. So she became an agent. And then after about a year and a half, she was making a 6-figure income. And so she wanted to buy this vehicle, this more expensive vehicle, which was a Jeep, right? And so she comes to the office, and they let her take the Jeep to drive it, right? Where they say, feel the wheel, seal the deal. So they're like, go ahead and take that for a day or two. Yeah, go take it for a ride. Bring it back when you're ready to sign paperwork. But so she was very nervous, and she pulled in the parking lot, and she said, I want to show you this car I'm thinking about buying. And so I went over, sat in the driver's seat. She sat in the passenger seat, and I just kind of sat there and loved the car. And I was so proud that she picked this car. And so she says, well, what do you think? And I said, well, what's your apprehension? She says, well, the payment is like $80 more than my other payment. I said, okay. I said, well, does that make you feel uncomfortable? And she says, yeah, I'm really uncomfortable. I said, well, let's break it down. I said, you're working part-time with me, and you were driving this car, the other car. And she goes, yeah. And I said, now you have made triple the amount of money that you made before, and yet you're nervous about spending an additional $80 a month. And she says, yeah, it's a little bit out of my comfort zone. Let's break that down for a second. When she was making significantly less, she could justify her Camaro payment. When she's making 3 times more, she had a hard time justifying an $80 increase. What do you say to that?
Yeah, have to take the risk in order to grow, because once you grow, it'll triple again, right? Your income level, you rise to the level of what you want to set for yourself. So if you stay where you are, will your income actually grow? But if you take a risk and you push yourself to be uncomfortable, right? When you put your back up against the wall, what do most people do?
Well, it's a fight or flight mentality. And that's really, I think she was nervous about it. I'm like, being nervous is okay, right? Being nervous about something is okay. But it also, if you're nervous about something, we'll use the word fear. If you're fearful about something, it's only because you're stretching your comfort zone from where you were comfortable. See, here's the challenge, Nikki, is people live too much in comfort, right?
Their little box.
Oh my gosh, and I can't tell you, and even so many people that I know, and I won't mention names, so many people that I know that they're like, oh, I want to have a job with benefits, and I like my little whatever 2-3% pay raises every year, and I don't really, I don't really need much, and I guess that's okay. I don't have an issue with somebody that thinks that way, but it certainly doesn't give you an amazing life. It just gives you a comfortable life, comfortable to you. That wouldn't be comfortable, but comfortable for you. I get challenged with people like, we'll go back to this agent, where she made the decision to purchase of this vehicle, and then her income obviously went up. What's fun today, though, about it, right? And I could tell you 4 or 5 different scenarios with this individual that caused her to grow to a point where today she's driving a Maserati. She lives in a beautiful horse property, which was interesting. She tried to buy this little rental place across the street from where she lived with her parents. And I'm like, no. Listen, you gotta go out and you gotta get yourself in a position where you're uncomfortable. And so today, obviously, she's done very well for herself financially. She's a multimillionaire, and she's living the life of her dreams. She's traveling around the world. She's flying first class. I got to tell you a funny story. And hopefully my good friend who this happened to, who I'm really good friends with today, will watch this video. So I was a professional coach, as many people know, for the Mike Ferry organization. And I was coaching this young individual from Utah. And so I asked her to give me some crazy, audacious goal that she'd like to accomplish personally for herself this year that I was coaching her. And this, we're going back probably 10, 12 years ago. And so she says, I'd like to take my family, my husband and my kids. I think she had 2 boys at the time. Or she probably still has 2 boys. She had 2 little kids. Now they're older because it's been a little bit of time. And she says, I want to take them to Italy. And I said, well, okay, that's really great, but how do you want to go to Italy? She goes, well, what do you mean? I want to take them to Italy. I said, well, you can take them to Italy, but how do you want the trip to be? She goes, okay. I said, how do you want to fly there? Do you want to fly there in the back of the plane, or do you want to sit in first class? She goes, oh, I didn't really think about that. And I'm like, okay, well, let's think about that. I said, do you want to stay in a hotel, or do you want to stay in the hotel? Do you want to stay in 5-star hotels? Do you want to have someone drive you around, and do you want to hire a tour, private tour? Because, by the way, they have those things. You can go hire a private tour. You can get a private tour of Rome and Italy and all those kinds of things if you want to have that. It just takes a little bit of money. I said, here's what I want you to do. I said, this week, this was my coaching advice. This week, I want you to go in. I don't care if you take all week to do it. Go in, and I want you to research a fabulous trip for you and your family. And I'm talking about any trip you want it to be like. I want you just to assume money is not your problem, and that your imagination and the lifestyle that you want to live has to be put into this thought, and then you have to make a decision from there of how much you are going to spend and what this thing's going to cost you, and then we'll talk next week and we'll coach through it. Fair enough. So we get back on the phone a week later, and I said, good morning, how are you? I said, I'm excited to hear about your goals and your dreams. I said, how did this planning of Italy go? And I was all excited, right? And she's quiet. And I said, did you do it? She says, yes. She was very quiet, very kind of somber tone in her voice. And I said, well, what's wrong? And she breaks down crying. And the next thing's out of her mouth, and again, she's probably going to watch this. The next thing's out of her mouth is she goes, through crying, do you know how much money it costs to fly first class to Italy?
A lot.
And I said, well, I'm assuming you're going to spend $20,000 or $25,000 to fly first class with you and your family. And so she goes, yeah, it was $18,000, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, fantastic. When are you going? She goes, you don't understand. She says, I don't have that kind of money. I'm like, not yet. You don't have it yet, but you will have it when you go. And she goes, well, I have no idea how I'm going to get there. I said, this is why we're working together. And so what was great is she created all of this fear. She decided she wanted to have this great trip and then started digging into the reality of the trip. And then in the end of the day, she came back and went, oh my gosh, this is so big, I can't even imagine it. Well, here's what's fun. So I coached her for a while, and then she went on, and I left the coaching world and started building my group, my company. She came up to me a couple years later, and because I'd seen her at different events, and she came up and gave me a big hug, big, beautiful, amazing smile on her face. She goes, "You're not gonna believe this." She goes, "I took that trip." I'm like, "You did? Tell me about it." And so she told me, she just hugs me again. She goes, "It was so amazing." I'm like, "What did you learn from all that?" And she goes, "I realized like my life was so small, and I didn't realize like I couldn't imagine spending all of that money flying first class and staying in these amazing hotels and having all these experiences because I'd never earned that kind of money before. However, now I earn so much more money than I ever thought I could. Now all I want to do is ever fly private and go have these great experiences." So let's piggyback off what you just said a few minutes ago. I think that we can dream big, but sometimes it gets so big for us emotionally
Mm.
and our fear takes over that it totally paralyzes our movement. Your thoughts on that?
Well, it does because it's the flight or fight, right? And so when we do, we stop. And that's is where what you did with her is the coaching. You continue to work. It's the small habits that you instill in yourself daily to push through that and having that growth mindset year over year, day after day, when you don't feel like it, in order to get to that. Because it took her years, right? To finally realize it's a process within ourselves, but we have to continue to want to grow. And if you don't want to grow, I don't think you can push through that financial thermostat, can you?
Well, I don't is it who doesn't want to grow? I think that most people want they they like the idea
The
of
idea of
having a
growth.
better life. Somewhere, because remember, this conversation today is about why people only push to their minimum standard and don't go beyond that. And so it's the steps are how do they make a conscious decision to say, I want more. Here's what I've always said, especially about real estate. And that is, if I ever ask an agent, hey, how'd you do last year? They'll give me some dumb, stupid answer like, oh, I sold $5 million last year in real estate.
Oh,
Or I sold, listen, I sold $8 or $10 million in real estate. No, how many units did you do? Well, how many houses did you sell? Well, I don't know. I mean, it was like 8 or 12, right? 8 or 12 million. I'm like, all right, that didn't help me,
yeah,
right? Or they'll say, well, I made X amount of money. I'm like, no, I didn't ask you that question either. I really cared about how many transactions you did last year. And I think that the problem with most people is they work on the money they want to make and then they look at the transactions that they need. I think the key to building wealth in real estate and to have the things that we talked about, like the dreams that these people talk about having, I think it comes down looking at the transactional count first,
hmm,
and the money always follows. Sometimes they look at the money, and the thing is, if you say, I want to make $300,000 next year, and you're only making 100,000 this year, if you say, I want to make 300,000 next year, and that is your focus, the likelihood of you doing it's pretty slim because you're so not used to that money that soon as that pain point goes away of paying that little house and that car and that little bit of money that you have in the bank and you feel really comfortable, soon as that gets met,
you're good.
you're paralyzed.
Yeah.
You're done. Like you're like, okay, well, I mean, I'd rather go and do this. I'd rather go have lunch with my friends. I'd rather go take the day off, even though it's not scheduled. I'd rather, hey, listen, I don't feel like going into work today. But if you're having to pay bills, if your mortgage is due or your rent is due or your car payment is due, you have to go do what you normally don't want to do until you no longer have to worry about that at that moment. And so, well, we have agents in here who will go out and have 20, 30, $40,000 months. And they worked. They fought, they dug, they scraped, they scratched, they cried, they whatever. And they finally get this amazing month. And then you don't see them for a month.
They
And you're
disappear.
like, what happened?
Yes.
Oh, I wasn't feeling that well. And I had family in town and I decided to take a little vacation. It's like, do you realize how hard you work to get here and the momentum that
Oof.
what the effort it takes to create momentum in your life, and you finally got to the point where all the stars lined up and the universe paid you on the success that you put in all of those weeks, and then you just stop working. And you know what happens? 30, 40, 60 days later, they're broke.
Yeah. They're back right
They're
where they
broke.
were.
they're celebrating for 30 days. Woohoo, this was really great. And them and their spouse are all excited. They're like, we're going to go to Hawaii. We're going to go to the Caribbean. Man, we're going to take the kids to Disneyland. And then we don't see them for 30 days. And then they come back, they start working, and then it's slow going. And they go, I don't know what happened, man. I can't get any traction. It's because you celebrated too early.
It's the lack of consistency within your own business, because it's day in and day out that they have to look at it like the transactions, right? You can look at the big picture, but if we don't get down to what we do daily and just work on that and stay focused in a year, where is that going to get you?
So what steps can we give them, I guess? I would say that potentially, if we look at this and go, how can you gradually move forward and feel like you're making progress in your growth? Okay. By the way, and I'll go online because I've had people who have loved to point the finger, by the way, at saying, there's a lot of these like,
Yeah.
I do not believe in debt. I believe if you have debt, you have to keep your income in relation to any debt that you're willing to accept. And if you're willing to, because I had a conversation a few years back with somebody who was saying, well, all you do is talk about this, that, whatever. It's like, right, but you have to have a responsible amount of spending, but you still have to have stretch spending, and you still have to put yourself uncomfortable. But once you've made the leap to do something that you're uncomfortable with, let's say like the agent I talked about buying the car, she made an $80,000 more investment in her vehicle, which made her feel uncomfortable. I knew that being uncomfortable was actually a good thing for her. She wasn't sure it was. I let her make the decision, but I heavily encouraged her to make the purchase, right? And I told her, in order for you to grow through this paralyzing thought process, you have to do something that you normally don't do. And if this is making you uncomfortable, I know you can afford it. You know you can afford it. You're questioning it. I'm not questioning it, because I know this is going to make a change for you in your life. So you make a small improvement, not a massive improvement, a small improvement. And all you're doing is convincing yourself, well, that wasn't so bad. And look I just increased my income by $50,000 because I actually went out and bought something that I really want. And I feel really good about myself for doing that. And then that can graduate into other things. And I own a lot of rental properties. And there are also people that go, well, you got to go out and leverage. You got to go out and get all this money from the bank. No, you don't. You might have to do that on one. You might have to do that on two. But when you do it, you just pay it down, pay it down, pay it down.
The slow
right?
growth.
So
Yeah.
the lesson here isn't getting in financial debt. The lesson here isn't go out and buy a car you can't afford. The lesson here isn't going out and taking an amazing trip if you can't afford to take an amazing trip, or go out and get some elaborate house that you're going to be stressed to the max to pay. That is not the message. The message here is, what can you take one step further that you're uncomfortable with, that you go, man, if I put my nose to the grindstone here and I really focus on my business, this is a stretch for me, but I think that I can make up any of this by just working really hard and staying focused on my time management, right?
The
What do you say?
consistency
What are
of
your
it.
thoughts on that?
I agree. You've got to stretch yourself, but you can't stretch yourself too much, but then it becomes daunting, right? And then the failure can kick in and make you paralyzed. But I look at it as not just in your business, but also in your personal life, is do one hard thing every day. What does that do for you in order to, one, stretch you both in your business and in your personal life for that growth to happen? And if we do, because nobody likes to do something that's hard, right? We put it off or we'll make excuses, but do one hard thing daily.
It's I love that you said that, because you're 100% right. I think people don't like discomfort, and they don't want to feel vulnerable, and they don't want to do anything hard. But I love how, and I love what Dave Ramsey says. He goes, you live and you do like nobody else does right now, so you can live a life like no one else later, right? And he talks about saving money, and I'm a big Dave Ramsey fan. I don't do everything Dave Ramsey says. Not that I'm smarter than Dave. Dave's way smarter than me. I was looking, he's got way more money than me. I need to listen to him, right? But I do think that a lot of the principles, probably all the principles he has, are effective. I try to follow as much of it as I possibly can. But one thing I do believe in 100%, and I would say this in my business, and I would say this in finances, as Dave is such an expert in, you do things now that no one else is willing to do. And so in Dave's world, it's you save money, pay off things, so later in life you'll live like nobody else.
Yeah.
And in the world I live in, I say, if you work more than everybody else, you keep your head down, you focus in on expanding yourself, your emotions, your talent, your skill, your work ethic. If you continue to do that now, at whatever age you are, later in life, your life becomes so much easier. I'll tell you what, Nikki, it's been interesting because for 15, 18 years, never paid attention to a whole lot other than how many houses can I sell? I'd make a goal, I'm gonna sell 50 houses, 75 houses, 100 houses, 120 houses. And I never focused on the money, but I knew the money came. I
Mhm.
need to do this, do this. Then pretty soon the money would always show up based on the transactional number. I never cared about the money. I just cared about the transactional number
Or the
because
splits,
or the
right?
splits or anything. I didn't really care about that because all I knew is I was going to make X amount of money based on how many houses I sold.
Yeah.
Right. And so I let my wife take care of the finances and I took care of the house sale. After doing it for 15 years and not celebrating too early, actually celebrating very little, to be honest with you, because I had a job to do. And the job that I had to do was to take care of my retirement portfolio, take care of the finances in my home, and then live the best life I possibly could. But then when I lived my work life like nobody else, I lived my personal life later in life like nobody else. There is a lot to saying, stop celebrating right now and put your face down in the sand a little bit and ignore all the noise and just continue to keep focusing on the things that that work. I think the biggest problem people have in making a lot of money is that they're too busy celebrating on every paycheck.
Well, I don't think celebration's a bad thing, right? Go have a nice dinner, but get back to work because your business isn't done yet. You haven't reached the actual big milestone yet, right? And you've got to continue to grow and push yourself and stretch yourself.
Yeah.
But it's okay to celebrate. I
Yeah.
think that's all right, but do it in a small way so then you can celebrate big down the road when you can live that life that you want.
Yeah. And so I think just based on time here, here's what I'll say to everybody today. It's not easy. It's actually hard because you're so used to doing the way you've been doing it. But it's not impossible, and you'll find that as you stretch yourself and it's difficult, you'll realize that you're actually putting yourself in a position where it becomes really easy. And then you keep stretching yourself, you work on that skill, it becomes easy. Then you stretch yourself, you're uncomfortable, you work on that skill and it becomes easy. And then pretty soon, after 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 years, you kind of look back and connect the dots and you say to yourself, it's interesting. I remember when I started, this is where I was at. I remember how broke I was. I remember how uncommitted I was and how undisciplined I am. And now, even though I'm probably not as disciplined as I probably should be, I celebrate a little probably more than I should have. But my gosh, I've connected these dots and see this amazing success that I've been able to do. And by the way, on your own accord, because all we can do is coach you and inspire you. Everybody still has to go do the work.
Yep.
Right? I just want to live a life, and I know you want to live life the same way, in that we're coaching people and inspiring in them through our actions.
Yeah.
Right? And if we can't live the life that we tell somebody else to live, then we're just nothing but hypocrites.
Yeah.
So if we aren't struggling ourselves, if I'm not putting myself in a position to always be uncomfortable, I've said this to somebody recently. I'm like, if there's a day that goes by, almost an hour, that I'm not feeling vulnerable about something that I'm doing, I know that I'm not growing. A good friend of mine said to me up in Kentucky, she said, how do you continually put yourself in a position where you're taking a risk? And I said, I don't know what that really means. She says, well, you're always doing things and taking chances. That's the only way you grow as a human being. The only thing we can do as a human being is to continually keep growing is taking a risk.
Yeah, but you hit it on the head of saying you've got to be vulnerable. And people don't like to be vulnerable. But as leaders, you have to be vulnerable in order to grow and also in order to lead.
That's fair. And so I want to say to everybody, and thank you for paying attention, and Nikki, thank you for your time. Go out, take a risk, go do something you normally don't do. Go to an event you normally don't go to. Go to a concert you normally don't go to. Go walk in a park you normally don't. Work on being uncomfortable on small levels. Go do small things that make you feel uncomfortable because it'll make the growth of your life so wonderful that you'll look back and connect the dots and go, man, I'm really glad that I took the risk. Hope everybody enjoyed this podcast. And if you guys have any questions, comments, please let me know. Hit the like button, the thumbs up button, and the subscribe button. We'd love to continue to keep bringing all this stuff to you. Everybody have an awesome day.